at the city and state level. Springfield City Council President Jesse Letterman, State Representative Brian Ash, as well as Springfield Councilor Tracy Whitfield, and we're also joined by Senator Warren's staff here today, and Juanita Batchelor, who is the founder of Mothers Overlooked Reach Out Empowerment More, and the mother of a gun violence victim, and John Rosenthal, founder of the nationally renowned Stop Handgun Violence, who has been a leader in Massachusetts and across our country in pointing to the need for much stronger gun safety legislation in our country. Today is National Gun Safety Awareness Day, and we are standing in the shadow of Smith Wesson, a company that manufactures, markets, sells, and profits from the semi-automatic assault weapons that kill Americans in alarming and horrifying numbers. You might have heard of Smith Wesson before. That's because AR-15 style assault weapons made by Smith & Wesson were used in mass shootings in Parkland, Florida, in Aurora, Colorado, in San Bernardino, California, shootings that collectively killed 45 people. Semi-automatic weapons are weapons of mass destruction, designed for the battlefield. Yet Smith & Wesson and other manufacturers, including Savage Arms of Westfield and Car Arms of Worcester, continue to flood our streets with them. And the consequences are devastating, as we've witnessed most recently in Buffalo, New York, Uvalde, Texas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the shooters fired AR-15 style assault rifles and took another 35 lives. The death count is mounting. It is past time for action. On this National Gun Violence Awareness Day, Americans across our country are sadly, tragically, and constantly reminded of the toll that these weapons are taking on our communities. But we don't need the reminder, because it has never slipped out of our minds once over the past several weeks, as more and more mass shooters murder more and more Americans with these assault weapons in hand. We stand here today because our hearts are broken, and we grieve for the victims and for their families. Every day, more than 110 Americans are killed with guns, and more than 200 are shot and wounded. The gun homicide rate in the United States is 25 times higher than that of any other developed nation. No other nation in the world experiences this level of gun violence, and its effect extends far beyond the casualties. Gun violence shapes the lives of millions of Americans who witness it, know a victim, or live in fear of the next shooting. We have to say it loud. We have to say it clear. Enough is enough. Americans shouldn't have to live like this, and Americans shouldn't have to die like this. We must stop gun violence now. Congress has a moral responsibility to the victims of gun violence, to their families, to their friends, to their communities, to all of us, to pass gun safety legislation now. My colleagues, Chris Murphy, and others are negotiating right now. But Republicans have historically not been willing to actually effectively pass gun safety legislation. I hope that we can find some common ground for the sake of all Americans. But if Republicans refuse to take even a modest step towards ending these senseless deaths and are complacent with the status quo, then they are complicit in violence and suffering for these families around our country. We don't need another moment of silence from them. We don't need a token that is pointed in their direction about prayers and concerns. What we really need is a movement of solidarity. For years, Republicans have put the safety of their campaign contributions ahead of the safety of kids' classrooms because of the National Rifle Association. That's the NRA to which Smith Wesson contributed more than $1.5 million in support for its lobbying efforts to kill gun safety legislation. That's right. Smith & Wesson contributed $1.5 million to the NRA so that there would not be gun safety legislation passed in our country. Smith & Wesson also offers NRA members special pricing on its products, which is a very deadly discount. Gun manufacturers' support for the NRA, like Smith & Wesson's, has strengthened the NRA's vise-like control over the Republican Party in our country. While Republican members of Congress cower in fear of the NRA, children across our country cower in fear in their classrooms because of their fear of guns in schools. I say to my Republican colleagues, no more putting checks before children. No more putting the Second Amendment ahead of second graders. Come to the table in good faith to negotiate and to pass gun safety legislation so that we can make NRA stand for not relevant anymore in American politics. A federal law on extreme risk protection orders, red flag laws, which takes guns out of the hands of those who are a danger to themselves or others. That would be a good start. That's something being negotiated right now. But the type of comprehensive gun safety legislation I would like to see has to go much further than that. It should include strengthening and expanding our system of background checks. We have to close the loopholes that allow sales at gun shows and online without a background check at all, or sales that can go through before a background check is complete. Background checks are overwhelmingly popular among the American people, among Republicans and Democrats alike, even among gun owners, with some polls showing upwards of 90% support. We should also reinstate the federal ban on assault weapons that Congress let expire in 2004. Studies show that an assault weapon ban could prevent 70% of mass shooting deaths. Massachusetts has an assault weapons ban that works, and there is legislation pending in the State House that goes further and would prohibit the manufacture of those weapons of war in our state. And I'm proud to be standing here to say that I support H 4303 up in the State House so that it passes, so that we don't allow for the manufacture of these guns here in our state. It's been introduced by Representatives Marjorie Decker and Frank Moran, State Senator Cynthia Cream. We should provide the support to get that legislation onto the governor's desk now. It only makes sense if you cannot sell or possess an assault weapon in Massachusetts. You shouldn't be able to manufacture an assault weapon here in Massachusetts and export death and destruction to other states from Massachusetts to the other states in our country. We know from our experience in Massachusetts that gun safety measures work. We have some of the nation's strongest gun safety laws that result in the second lowest rate of gun deaths in the United States. John Rosenthal, who is with us today, has been the leader in ensuring that Massachusetts is at the cutting edge on these issues. That's why I have introduced into the United States Senate legislation that captures all of the laws from Massachusetts and have introduced it as a single bill. Because if the rest of the nation adopted the laws of Massachusetts, we would be able to dramatically reduce the number of gun fatalities, gun injuries across our whole country. What do those measures include? Well, safety measures like requiring first-time firearms license applicants to complete safety training. Safety measures like giving local police chiefs the responsibility for approving, suspending, and revoking firearms licenses. Safety measures like an extreme risk protection order that allows gun licensing authorities, family members, or other household members to ask a judge to suspend someone's firearms license, remove firearms from their possession, and prevent them from obtaining new weapons. And safety measures like requiring gun owners to keep firearms safely secured. We have to use every tool at our disposal to keep guns off the streets and out of the schools of our country. When I return to Washington, I'm going to continue to fight the NRA and its aiders and abettors like Smith and Wesson that would rather profit from gun violence than protect against it. And while mental health has to be funded in our country, there are mental health issues in every other industrialized country in the world as well. But they do not have the epidemic of gun violence which we have in our country. We know that it is because there is access to guns, not access to mental health care, which is causing this pandemic of gun violence to spread all across our country. That is what we have to focus on. How do we keep guns out of the hands of those who should not have them? So that's why we're here today on this special day in order to commemorate the need to pay attention to this issue and then simultaneously to ensure that we have the remedies that we put in place. So let me begin by introducing our own great leader from the state of Massachusetts who has the national voice in advocating for gun safety measures from our own home state, John Rosenthal. Welcome, John.
There is no member of Congress who has been more vigilant since we started this effort in Massachusetts in promoting what we're doing in Massachusetts and trying to replicate what we're doing in Massachusetts than Ed Markey. He's one of my heroes on a lot of issues, and including gun violence prevention. You know, we're here at Memorial Field. Smith and Wesson's in the background. The late Michael Kennedy and I, one of President Kennedy's nephews and Bobby Kennedy's son, built a billboard on the Mass Pike in 1994. I'm a gun owner and a business person. Michael was a business person and a victim. Since 1994, over 1 million Americans have died from firearms in this country. If you go back to 1975, that's 1.5 million Americans killed by guns in America. That is more Americans than than all U.S. servicemen and women killed in all foreign wars combined. And you know what else? I will venture to guess that 1.5 million Americans killed by guns in this country is not only more than all U.S. servicemen and women killed in all foreign wars combined with weapons of war like Smith and Wesson makes, but it's probably more people than were killed by the 2 atomic bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Don't for a minute think that what Smith and Wesson makes are sporting rifles. After Sandy Hook, and I wear this little hand commemorating the 20 first graders and the 19 fourth graders killed most recently, which was 22 mass shootings ago just since Uvalde, Texas. That AR-15, as General Stanley McChrystal defined, is a weapon of war. It is designed to stop an incoming infantry. The .223 round is designed not to penetrate, but to tumble and cause maximum soft tissue damage. Those 20 first graders had to be identified by their clothing after getting 3 to 11 rounds from an AR-15. The last time I stood on this memorial field was with Manuel Oliver, whose only son, Joaquin, and David Hogg from Parkland, whose only son, Joaquin, was killed with a Smith & Wesson made in Massachusetts AR-15. Joining us was Sandy Phillips, whose daughter was killed with a made in Massachusetts AR-15 by Smith & Wesson at the Aurora movie theater. And you know, since 1999, when Columbine happened with a made in Massachusetts assault weapon by Savage Arms here in Springfield, our children have never known one single day of going to school without the risk of being shot. Not one day. And that is on us. And last Friday, a week ago today, I was standing burying my 94-year-old dad, just like you're supposed to do. Kids are supposed to bury their dads. It was the same day that moms and dads were burying 8-year-olds. Burying a member of the greatest generation who served in World War II, and as a result of what will likely be known as the worst generation, who didn't care enough to make it safe for their own kids to go to school unless we change this. And I will tell you that since 1994, here in Massachusetts, we have treated guns like cars. They're both inherently dangerous products. You need safety training. You need safe storage. You need renewable licensing. And guess what? Just like you can't own a tank, you can't own a weapon of war, more of which are made by Smith & Wesson, that are illegal to be owned, that are illegal to be sold here in Massachusetts, and are creating carnage in every other state. If every state simply treated guns like cars, like Massachusetts, and had the same low gun death rate as Massachusetts, 27,000 lives would be saved a year. Think about that. Instead, today we'll bury 110 more. Since we have stood here, a kid has been shot. Every 30 minutes, a kid under 19 is shot in America. Every 3 hours, a kid dies. And since we built that billboard, the number of kids killed, you could fill Fenway Park 3 times over with kids under 19 killed by guns in America. And it is on the shameless, spineless Republicans in Congress. They require a hunting license everywhere in this country. And when you hunt deer, you're limited to, you need a license, and you're limited to 5 rounds. When you hunt duck, you're limited to 3 rounds to protect the duck and deer population. When you want to hunt elementary school kids in their classrooms, or the next 110 people that will die today, no license, no limit on the number of rounds. After every mass shooting, we hear it's mental illness. As Ed said, every country has mentally ill people. No other country arms them without background checks and detection by law enforcement. We always hear you can't do it because of the Second Amendment. Scalia was clear on the Second Amendment. You can't ban guns in the common use of the time of the founders, and he said, I don't mean assault weapons. They didn't exist. And then you hear gun laws won't work. You are in the gun violence capital of America here in Massachusetts because of our gun laws. And every single state with tough gun laws has low gun death rates. But it is not as a result of the new Smith Wesson. The old Smith Wesson in '94, who I met with, the president of Smith Wesson said, we made a smart gun. We made a child-proof gun in 1904. And I brought him to the White House, and he agreed to put money into smart gun technologies like your automobiles. They were boycotted out of business, bought by a Wall Street investment firm called American Outdoor Brands, who makes money after every single mass shooting. And they can't be sued, even when they market directly to criminals. And I'm going to give you one example of how they can market, unlike any other business. Barrett is a Tennessee company, makes a .50 caliber assault rifle. They marketed that weapon as capable of taking down an aircraft, tell you where to put the round, and Osama bin Laden bought 12 of them when he was fighting the Soviets. The weapon used at Fort Hood military base, marketed as capable of penetrating 48 layers of soft body armor. Who wears soft body armor? Police and military. Assault weapons made by Smith & Wesson are made for 2 purposes. Kill as many people as possible without reloading, and kill police who carry 13 to 17 rounds. We can change this. This is a choice, but it's about changing Congress and voting the spineless Republicans out of office. And thanks to Ed and our delegation and our leaders in Massachusetts, we have proven that gun laws work. We are the model for the nation, and it must be replicated. Thank you.
Wow. You're so powerful, such a great leader. And now we're going to hear from another great leader, Juanita Batchelor, founder of Mothers Overlooked Reach Out Empowerment. The organization is called MORE, and the mother of a gun violence victim. We thank you, Juanita, so much for coming here today and telling your story, and in telling that story, telling the story of so many thousands of other families in our country. So welcome, Juanita.
Good afternoon. My name is Juanita Batchelor, and I'm the founder and Executive Director.
Can you take down your mask? Is that possible? Just speak up a little.
My name is Juanita Batchelor. I am the founder and Executive Director of MORE, Mother Overlooked Reaching Out Empowerment. I started this organization as I attempted to turn pain into power after losing my son, Daryl Lee Jenkins Jr., to gun violence. You see, my son was gunned down on June 4th, 2014, right in front of our home in Springfield. Unfortunately, my experience with gun violence did not end there. On June 26, 2020, my niece Tamara Clark was shot in a drive-by shooting in Springfield. And then the most recent tragic incident took place last year where my son-in-law, Reginald Desashore, was shot and killed on April 28, 2021, also in Springfield. I want you to know that I deeply understand the pain of the families in Texas and Buffalo, New York. And my heart goes out to each and every one of those families. I truly feel their pain. Seriously, can you imagine your child being here one minute and gone the next due to senseless act of gun violence? This is much work to make a dent in gun violence. Surely federal, state, and local legislators' efforts would help, but the guns will still be out here. Did you know that there are 120 guns per 100 people in the United States? That is more than any other country by far. We must all come together and demand policymakers, from city councilors to state leaders to federal government, start putting money into black and brown communities like here in Springfield. We know that this kind of violence does not occur at this rate in other communities where individual families have their basic needs met, and where the equality housing, healthcare, after-school program for youth, quality schools, and opportunities for meaningful employment exists. We watch over and over as leaders neglect to fund our neighborhoods. This is not rocket science. We can and must do this. I want to close with making the larger connections here as well. And these connections are often not made as we point fingers at individuals as lone wolves operating all by themselves. Let's be crystal clear. The U.S. exports more military weapons to other nations than any other country in the world. We have also militarized our police, and they specifically enact violence on black and brown communities. We all must understand that violence from the state is central in this equation. Thank you all for listening, and I hope we can make some positive changes as soon as possible. We owe this to our children.
Thank you so much. And Smith Wesson is headquartered here in Springfield, but we have got great leaders here in Springfield willing to stand up and say that what this company does is wrong. And next I'm going to introduce the new president of the Springfield City Council, Jesse Letterman, great leader on this issue. Welcome, Jesse.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Senator Markey. I'm Springfield City Council President Jesse Letterman, and I'm proud to be here with the Senator and with my colleague, Councilor Tracy Whitfield, and everybody who's here today to say that enough is enough. Like my neighbors across the city of Springfield and our brothers and sisters across our entire country, I've been struggling as we've seen this most recent spate of mass shootings taking place. And you see the outpouring on social media of many people speaking out, saying, when are we going to see change in our country? And you'll hear some people say, well, what's the impact of posting on social media? Why does everybody feel like they have to come out with their statement on Twitter and on Facebook? Well, the truth is, I have a belief that every resident, from the city of Springfield to the Commonwealth to our country, you can see, feels a true societal responsibility to act in the wake of these acts of terrorism and violence. And for many people in their everyday lives, they're limited in how they can act. Posting on social media, voting in local, state, and federal elections are ways that they can act. But as leaders locally, as leaders at the state level and leaders at the federal level, we also have an opportunity to act. And you know who else has a societal responsibility and opportunity to act? Our industry leaders, our industry leaders have the same responsibility that we have to act, and by their contributions to the NRA, an organization that blocks common sense reform at the federal level, they have failed in their societal responsibility to act. And those failures come home to roost right here in the city of Springfield. They roost across our country because we know that many of the guns that come into our community come from states that don't have the same laws that we have on the books. And I'm not saying there's a one-size-fits-all solution or something that will solve this problem in and of itself, only one issue. We know this is a big issue. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do every single thing we can to knock down this cycle of violence. When these mass shootings occur across our country, they reverberate. For the communities they happen in, it is the most devastating event that could possibly occur, and I pray every day that we don't confront it in the city of Springfield. But last night I was on a board meeting for a local youth resource organization that I happen to be on the board of. We spent a significant amount of time talking about how secure is our youth facility. How much money do we have to spend, and what can we afford in our budget to make it even more secure? Do we need to hire security at all hours of the day for our children to be able to come in and participate in youth sports and participate in mentorship opportunities? And just like it always is, the cities that are hit the hardest by the problem are left trying to figure out how to pay to protect our children and our residents. And we're wearing orange today to recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day, but as you heard from my dear friend Juanita Batchelor, for too many families in our city and cities like ours across the country, every day is Gun Violence Awareness Day. Every day is Gun Violence Awareness Day for the mothers and fathers that lose their children, and for the children that have lost their mothers and fathers. All of these events and issues are connected, and we have a duty to act at every level, from the grassroots to the United States Senate. And so I'm thankful, Senator Markey, for giving us the opportunity to be here today, because I've been struggling for the last several weeks of how do we really make clear in a real way what we want to see. And today, it's pretty clear. We need action at every level, from residents, from industry leaders, and from our elected officials. Thank you so, so much.
And we need leadership up in the State House, and we have that. We have that in our great State Representative, Brian Ash, who is our voice up there fighting to make sure that we continue to pass the strongest laws in our country. Let me present to you Representative Brian Ash.
Thank you, Senator Markey. Good afternoon. And normally I'd say I'm glad to be here, but I'm not. I'm sad to be here. It's a shame that collectively we're still working on something like this. And if anybody thinks that Senator Markey's being reactive, it's not at all. He's being proactive. Senator's been working on gun violence issues for a long time. And I have the honor of serving on Joint Committee for Public Safety and Homeland Security. And about 8-10 years ago, we passed some common sense gun law reforms. And going into it, I appreciated our chair at the time, Hank Naughton. We didn't do it reactionary. We didn't try to rush anything. We took over a year and went across the state doing open forums so everybody could have their say. We had one at Stick. There was almost 500 people there, many of them from Smith and Wesson, because we wanted to hear from everybody. It wasn't a one-sided debate. We wanted to hear from people that had concerns on both sides. And at the end of it, I believe what we did is made legislation that makes people's lives safer. No law is going to protect everybody. No law is going to prevent everyone from doing harm to someone, but it's about prevention. And for those who think it's an impingement on their civil rights or on their Second Amendment right, I'm more concerned about the rights of parents sending their children to school, the children going in there feeling safe. And when you look around, we change things. We adapt as a society. We look at our speed limits on the highway. They've changed because they know speed kills, so they brought them down to a safer thing. Does it correct everything? No, but it prevents more accidents. When you go on an airplane, the cockpits weren't locked before. Now they're secured. Why? Because we learned from our mistakes. Why haven't we learned from our mistakes here in the country? Again, I applaud all of our speakers here. I applaud you for coming out and for covering this. This isn't about taking away anybody's rights. This should be a good thing for lawful gun owners. This should be something they'd be proud of to get behind, because this doesn't take away their rights. It doesn't give them the ability to own a firearm, whether it's for hunting or whether it's for personal protection. But on the same hand, one of the things we did here in Massachusetts, which I think helps a lot, is having the local police chiefs involved. So when somebody's going for a license, they meet with their local police chief. Especially in a smaller town, they're going to know who these people are. They're going to know who should or shouldn't have a firearm in their possession. And it's because of things like this, as was mentioned, that Massachusetts has one of the lowest rates of violence from guns in the country. So I'm proud to be here with my friends, with my colleagues, and I thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And next we're going to hear from another local leader here, City Councilor Tracy Whitfield. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. I don't have a long speech or prepared remarks. I was invited at the last hour, but I think that it's fitting that Senator Markey is here in the city of Springfield to talk about stricter gun laws. I want to offer my condolences to the families in Texas and Buffalo and Sandy Hook, but we don't have to go far to talk about gun violence. We can talk about gun violence right here in the city of Springfield. Weekly, there is a death in the city of Springfield of my friends' children. Weekly, I get phone calls on how can we help, what can we do to prevent the senseless loss of lives of young men and women that's probably mainly under their 30s in the city of Springfield. So if Smith Wesson can give $1.5 million to the NRA, then Smith Wesson, that's located right here in the city of Springfield, along with the Springfield Mayor's Office, can give funding to support efforts that are solutions to eliminate gun violence right here in the city of Springfield. You don't have to donate to the NRA. We need it right here. We have a problem with equitable housing. We have a problem with equitable job opportunities. We have food insecurities in the city of Springfield. Providing funding can offer solutions to those problems that we could solve right here in the city of Springfield to reduce the gun violence right here. Of course we need stricter gun laws nationally and locally. Of course we need that. But we need support. While Massachusetts have low deaths, Springfield is probably the second or third highest city with gun violent deaths in the state of Massachusetts. And one of the manufacturers, one of the largest manufacturers, is housed right across the street. So I ask that Smith & Wesson, Savage Arms, local elected officials support eliminating gun violence in the city of Springfield. Support solving the homicides like Juanita Batchelor's son in the city of Springfield. Let's put more effort toward doing the things that are right. Let's put more pressure on elected officials from the Republican Party that disagree with that. Let's come together and do what we can to resolve and eliminate gun violence right here in the city of Springfield. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Tracy is right. All of our speakers are right. The Republican Party is a wholly owned subsidiary of the National Rifle Association. They have been for a generation. They've made it very, very difficult to pass new laws which enhance the safety of Americans. In 1994, we were successful in passing a ban on assault weapons being sold in the United States. But the way the NRA worked is that that ban expired after only 10 years. But another thing happened in 1994. I was successful in having a law created that kept out up to 2022 15 million Chinese assault weapons that cost only the price of a pair of sneakers from being on the streets of our country. That ban on the importation of Chinese assault weapons has not expired. But companies like Smith Wesson continue to manufacture them here and sell them here on the streets of our country. We need a ban on assault weapons in our country. We need a ban on high-capacity magazines. We have a ban that has to be put in place that you have to be at least 21 years old in order to purchase a weapon. And we need to repeal the law which provides immunity to Smith & Wesson, immunity to these gun manufacturers from being sued by Americans if their family members have been harmed by the consumer product which they make, which are guns. Americans can sue the tobacco industry. Americans can sue the auto industry if a family member is injured. But there's one consumer product that has been given immunity, and that is the gun industry in our country. That must be repealed. They must be made accountable. So we're at a moment of historic political reckoning. The gun industry in our country must be made accountable. We must pass legislation in the United States Senate and House of Representatives. We must put every Republican on record so that the American voters know who voted yes for safety and who voted no in order to protect the NRA. That is our moment of political reckoning. Gun safety has to be on the ballot in every congressional district, in every state in 2022. It's led by Massachusetts. We have the strongest laws, and we're still not satisfied. And as John said, if the rest of the country adopted our laws, we could cut gun safety, gun fatalities, gun injuries in half, because we know they work, while still not denying anyone the right to buy a gun. What's our key provision? If you want to buy a gun in Massachusetts, you have to go into the police chief in Springfield or any one of the other 351 cities and towns and be interviewed to see whether or not you qualify. That's a red flag. Those are the people who know you best, the police in your community, because they don't want to have to arrive at a home at 2 a.m. in the morning where there is trouble when they knew that they could have prevented that individual from having a gun. So this is an alignment of citizens and police to ensure that we have the protections against the wrong people having guns in our society. So we thank all of you for coming here today. This is a matter of urgent historic necessity. Otherwise, we are going to see a continuation day after day, week after week, of this carnage on the streets of our country, which is avoidable. So let me stop there and answer any questions which you may have about anything. Question? Yes, sir. Can you just speak up just a little?
Smith & Wesson, as you've heard, is planning on leaving Massachusetts. They say politicians have made it not a very suitable climate for their product. What do you see as the impact of them leaving and the impact on the people who work there?
Well, the impact is going to be that Massachusetts is the leader in saying that we do not want to see the manufacture of assault weapons in our state exported to the rest of the country, even as they're banned here in the state of Massachusetts. And we will then work in order to make sure that we find a new company to come into this incredible space to produce things that actually benefit our society. And we will work in a partnership with the city and the state in order to accomplish that goal. And John, why don't you say a few words on that?
I had something to say. Smith Wesson, after we filed the bill to ban the manufacture of assault weapons that are currently already banned in Massachusetts from ownership and sale, Smith & Wesson announced they're leaving Springfield. What they didn't announce is they have been leaving Springfield for 3 or 4 years. And then what they also didn't say is there are 2,000 people working here and only 500 are moving to Tennessee. And they have been moving to Tennessee for 3 to 4 years because of the cost of living in Tennessee. The wages are lower in Tennessee, and they're lying. And by the way, the 500 people who they said would be leaving, other local manufacturing businesses right around here asked them to come for a job interview because they need them here if they don't want to leave. And besides which, it is not only immoral to make weapons of war that aren't even allowed here to be made here, how on God's earth can the owners of Smith & Wesson live here in the safest state in the nation, and their children are safer in schools, they're safer in movie theaters, they're safer in malls, they're safer because of the gun laws that they, Smith & Wesson, fund to try and undermine? That doesn't cut it. And Smith & Wesson has lied for years about it. And they could easily make personalized guns that only cops and only, the individual owner could fire. And then that would create real jobs.
So John is right. And I will also say this, that we can do something. After an entire generation, I was successful in adding $50 million to the federal budget over the last 2 years so that the Centers for Disease Control can do the study of the causes of gun violence in our society, why we are so different from the rest of the world. And that funding is right now at the CDC. So we can pass legislation, but we're going to have to do it in a context of political accountability for Republicans, so that they know that it's not just the NRA to whom they're accountable, but to the voters in our country. Are there any other questions that people may have? Yes, sir.
Jeff, you talked about it a little bit. What's your message to the average person out there who's saying, why is something going to change now? What can I do about it? This division on the opposite side of the aisle, how am I supposed to not throw my hands up and assume that nothing's going to change?
I don't think this is just a moment. I think this is now a movement all across our country. You can feel right now how terribly concerned parents are about their children in schools. We should not question for a second how dramatic the change has been over the last couple of weeks. Yes, the Republican Party is going to try to rope-a-dope this issue, hope that after the last funeral of the last child has been completed, that somehow or other this will die down and go away. It's not going to happen this time. There's something profound which has changed in our country. And I think that the politics of America in 2022 are largely going to revolve around whether or not politicians vote for or against gun safety in our country. That moment has turned into a movement, and that movement is going to demand accountability on Election Day this year. Questions from anybody? Yes, ma'am. Can you just move a step or two closer? Yeah, and I will ask John if he would get up here on that as well. Yeah, a brilliant lawyer found a way to circumvent the almost ironclad prohibition on the sale of weapons that ultimately result in the deaths of innocent people in our country. But that cannot be relied upon in general to provide the full panoply of protections which the American people are going to be demanding. It just can't be the exception, which is the law in our country. There has to be a rule that makes it possible for people to be able to sue. So I'd ask John to come over and.
It was a Bushmaster AR-15 made in Maine that killed the first graders at Sandy Hook. All that happened was there was a settlement in that case against Remington. Remington, by the way, is owned by Cerberus Capital Management. It's a private equity firm on Wall Street named after the three-headed dog guarding the gates of hell. They own Bushmaster. Think about that one. All that happened was a judge allowed discovery. It was a settlement. It did not go to trial. Who knows if it would have. But all I know is Bushmaster didn't want their emails looked at. They didn't want their marketing brochures looked at. They didn't want it made public just how egregious they are marketing their weapons directly to both criminals, domestic and international terrorists, and young men. They marketed their weapon as giving you back your manhood. That's why Remington, Bushmaster, Cerberus settled, because they did not want the families in a courtroom showing a jury what 20 first graders look like after getting 3 to 11 rounds and are indistinguishable looking because they've been killed with military weapons. It was worth tens of millions. It probably would have been worth hundreds of millions for Remington to not have the public and the jury see pictures like that.
Are there any other questions people may have? Thank you all so much for coming out. Much appreciated.